You'd said earlier on when we were talking, I think before I hit record, but we were talking about the sort of buy-in that you have currently at the company you're working with. Where's that buy-in come from? Because a lot of what you're describing, and just to clarify, is that, so much of the early work is, exploratory, right? I mean, I think I've said this before, but I think a lot about building partner programs and early partner opportunity, much like the scientific method, the idea of forming a hypothesis and then going and testing and seeing if it works and measuring and understanding and validating and then iterating and maybe trying it again and then finally coming to a conclusion that either says I was right or I was wrong. That takes time. And so I'm curious how you've gone about developing buy-in, or if it already existed, where do you think that comes from? Because I can imagine folks wanting to understand, how do I do that in, my own opportunity? How do I bring that to my own startup?
Yeah, so I think I have two examples here. So the company Mo I joined right now, I would say that it existed already. They hired me because they had a feeling that, partnerships is the way to go. And it mostly came from just finding another growth levers, you could say so, right? So they just had marketing and direct sales. And then they were thinking, okay, what else could we do? And, partnerships and outbound was like the next step for them. And there no need for a lot of effort from my side. They're kind of believing in this, and it also comes partially from investors and advisors who are also well known within the industry. So HR industry, I'm always HR tech. So they also believe that there's a lot of room for partnerships. I think that's what you should aim for if the belief is not there, to really convince the CEO, or I don't know if you have exposure to the board or investors. And the second example I could share was Localize. We're also joined rather early and around also 30th employee without any partnership efforts. And we scaled the team globally. And there it was actually completely different. So I did join, but they just viewed this as a big experiment, I would say, especially in the first year. So they were, they had enough resources at that point. So there wasn't like an issue. And they were like, we don't know anything about partnerships. We have really kind of no expectations at this point, but we are ready to, give some time for you to try out things. And that's also, I think it's amazing thing to have also early in the days, just like a trust to, experiment for half a year, for maybe even a year. And yeah, I ended up, proving, some value to them apparently that they were ready to invest more in the team and then scale. So yeah, I think it's always a tough question, but typically if you're hired, there is a certain belief in partnerships. I would say that the toughest, I guess, comes later. When you want to hire a team, when you want to do a lot of things, then you have to be able to prove value in more, I guess, data-driven way.
Yeah, that's a good segue too, because I think, what you just shared is valuable, right? It's an experiment. You're trying, you're learning as you go. How do you start then to anchor in specific metrics? I mean, do you have metrics that you default to? Are there things that you took from your previous opportunity that you brought here today that to be really valuable to not only prove, I think in part that this is working, right? That's to your statement before in terms of like, I want to build a team now. I want to scale this thing. How do I validate that? But also, how do you validate it for yourself? How do you know that the energy and effort you're putting in the work is actually yielding specific results that you're looking for? How are we measuring all that?
Yeah, so I think it's similar to what you do later, but basically we actually discussed this question today within Mo, and I think what we agreed that now we're just validating the idea of different types of partners, right? So you don't have like a revenue stream or lead stream coming in, and that's probably wouldn't be the case still for several months. So I think you have to really carefully track everybody you approach and be more thorough at what stage does it stop, so because typically I think it's just like either we progress and we close the partner, or it's a lost partner. So I think it might be smart to really be a bit more thorough here. Okay, so first, I don't know, contact established, meaning they are interested, or somebody at least gave enough, thought to answer you. First call, I don't know, second call, demos, agreement, actual signed partner, because that will give you then a bit more detailed analysis afterwards, right? Because if you just have won or lost partners, I think it's not so clear what happened in between, right? And then maybe you seem to start to see some patterns. Maybe you're losing a lot of partners after a demo. Then it's like, maybe something's wrong with how you're presenting, or maybe if you're losing them in the legal stage, maybe you have to review how you do these things. Maybe you have to, tough legal agreements or something. So yeah, I think that's what we're doing currently in the very, very early stage until you can actually go to the revenue generating part.
With that, I love that call out. I don't think I've heard someone say that before. I agree with you. Like the idea of building a formatted, funnel based approach to the way that you actually manage the opportunity with the partner. And then to your point, tracking it. I think it's really interesting because it's easy to say at scale, we know now how to build an engine because it's not so dissimilar perhaps in many ways to your direct sale, right? You want to have like an early discovery. You want to go and do, to your point, perhaps a demo of the platform or solution. Maybe you want to do some sort of like a deep dive conversation, but ultimately you're trying to get to a point where you transact, which is, direct is buying the software and partner should be signing the agreement. But what you're describing is this idea of really remaining a student of the process. And I wholeheartedly subscribe to the idea of spending time at each stage and understanding the way that you do it. I wonder, when I used to sell, and even when I was, running training teams, we always talked about entry and exit criteria. So like when I leave the discovery call, I need to have these 3 questions answered. And when I enter the deal stage, I need to have these 3 boxes checked, and really building a detailed framework around the specifics in terms of the components at each stage. Are you doing that? Like, are you at that level of detail early on? Or are you spending more time just sort of looking at whether folks do or do not progress beyond a stage and then digging in perhaps to some more level of detail?
I think I actually have these things in my mind, like these questions, but I'm not really like detailing them yet in a CRM or any other way. So I think at first it's I want to leave the first call kind of feeling confident that we're also solving existing issue for the partner. So, I would ask, what is, of course, what their business does, what are they struggling with, what are their customers asking for that they're not providing? And, I want to see some overlap there. And what's important, not to have any really overlap with their product, because I don't know if it's relevant for listeners. But like HR tech, for example, it's very saturated currently. And, there are like a lot of different software providers doing a lot of different things where, some of the functionality starts to overlap. And that's always like a red flag, because how will we work together, right? If you are selling at least part of what I do in your software, right? I don't see it happening really, especially if it's one of your first partners, you want to make sure that there are no kind of problems in that sense. So that's one thing, just, being sure that there is like some problem, like actual problem, then trying to find how severe is that problem, because if it's just like something they stumble upon once in half a year, like truth be told, they're probably not extremely driven, right? They're just like, yeah, it's kind of nice to have, but I mean, if we won't have a solution for it, that's also fine, right? We will live. But if it's something they hear, every week, if it's, bigger customers are talking about it, then again, they right away become like much more interested in how we can tackle it, how we can solve it, right? And then there is a certain, I guess, people factor. So do they have partnership team? If not, then who am I talking? Is this person actually have time to deal with it, right? Because I think it's sometimes overlooked, especially in smaller companies. They typically don't have like a head of partnerships at, up till 50 people. That's very likely that they don't have. It's either VP of sales or head of sales, maybe even the CEO. So that's also a very important factor, I think, to figure out, are they ready for it internally? And yeah, these are the kind of, I think, the main things that come to my mind. I really look forward to, because if they're missing, then sooner or later this kind of falls through.
Yeah, that's actually a really good series of observations and excuse me, a nice framework to think about in terms of how to actually go and manage that opportunity, be intentional about it. So I'm glad you shared that. This has been great. We're at time. I appreciate the conversation. Obviously, this has been a really interesting dialogue. If folks want to get in touch with you, where do they reach out? How do they find you online?
LinkedIn, yeah, I'm a LinkedIn girl, so find me on LinkedIn. I always accept fellow partnership folks, and I also tend to write now and then some of my observations. So
nice, that's fantastic. All right, I'll make sure I tag you when this goes to LinkedIn as well. Listeners, thank you for checking out another episode of Outcomes. As always, I'm your host, Barrett King. Please like, subscribe, comment, and we appreciate you all. Agnes, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you soon. Take care.